July 14, 1944. Normandy. The hedgerows around St. Lo were shrouded in smoke that did not move. It hung over the fields like a second skin, sealing everything in silence. A camera could have panned over that landscape and found no horizon, only a wall of gray, quivering in the heat. The soil was torn open from the morning's shelling, black with soot and rainwater. Somewhere in that smoke, the sound of a single idling engine pulsed, steady and patient. The field report called it Hill 214, but on the maps it had no elevation marker, just a small ink circle scribbled by a lieutenant who never returned. In the archives of Fort Knox, there exists one file that should not exist at all. It carries no serial code, no official signature, just the title A2 Hill 214. It was found inside a mislabeled box decades later, among acoustic research recordings, not combat reports. The carbon copy paper is half-burned, the typewritten lines faint. Yet one sentence remains clear: enemy Panther destroyed, line of sight impossible. That sentence begins the story of Staff Sergeant Raymond Keller. Inside his Sherman M4A1 that morning, the air was dense enough to taste. Oil fumes, sweat, and the metallic tang of the spent shell casings carpeted the floor. The tank had been hit the night before, nothing serious, just a near miss that jammed one of the periscopes. The commander was unconscious from shrapnel. Radio communication had fractured into static and half-sentences. The platoon, cut off, waited in place, unsure whether they were advancing or retreating. The fog blurred friend and foe into the same gray. Keller sat at his gunner's station, eyes not on the periscope but on the faint vibration beneath his boots. He could tell distance from tremor, direction from echo. He was 25, soft-spoken, and known to his crew as Numbers. He had earned the nickname not from any education, he'd never finished high school, but from the way he calculated angles on scraps of cigarette paper. During training, instructors had joked that he aimed like a mathematician, not a soldier. They said war didn't wait for geometry. But Keller listened more than he talked, and he trusted what he heard. The loader, Private Leonard Moss, was younger, all nerves and chatter. "We should wait for the lieutenant's call," he muttered, staring at the dead radio. "They said Panthers ahead of the hedgerow. Maybe two." Keller didn't answer. His hand rested on the elevation wheel, slow and steady. He was listening again, not to Leonard, not to the wind, but to the rhythm beyond the fog. Somewhere through that haze, a Panther tank was moving. Its Maybach engine produced a distinctive growl, lower than the Sherman's, more deliberate. Keller had memorized that sound back in Sicily. It meant trouble. The world outside flickered, not from light, but from pressure. Every distant artillery burst made the fog tremble like breathing lungs. Keller knew the Panther had to be within 400 yards. Anything further would sound thinner, weaker, delayed by fractions of a second. He counted those seconds like heartbeats. 1, 2, 3, echo. He imagined the sound bouncing off the hedgerow walls, returning with a subtle pitch difference, the way a mechanic might listen to a wrench dropped on concrete. Through the intercom, the wounded commander's voice rasped, "Hold fire. Wait for spotter." Then silence again. Keller turned to Leonard. "Spotter's gone," he said. Leonard frowned. "How do you know?" Keller nodded toward the radio. "Because that's him talking." The static had just whispered a garbled fragment, the same voice repeating, "Target, left of smoke line. Left of..." The line faded into distortion. The commander had been dead for over an hour. The loader's face drained of color. "Jesus," he whispered. "That's..." Keller raised a hand for quiet. There it was again, not the voice this time, but the Panther. A mechanical purr shifting into a rev. The German driver was repositioning. That meant the gunner inside would follow. Turret turning in a slow arc. Keller felt the vibration under his seat change direction. Slightly diagonal. He drew an invisible triangle with his fingers on the armor wall. He closed his eyes. The inside of the tank vanished. What remained was space, distance, sound, memory. He recalled the field earlier that morning, the pattern of the hedgerows, the shallow depression just before the rise. If he were a Panther commander, he'd be there, using the embankment as cover. The gun would emerge through the foliage like an eye. Keller's mind turned it into coordinates. Leonard's breathing grew louder. "Orders say," Keller interrupted softly. "Orders can't see through smoke." He adjusted the gun's traverse 3 degrees right. The handwheel clicked, deliberate and slow. He exhaled through his nose the way he did before every shot. The shell loaded, a single armor-piercing round, the last clean one in the rack. Outside, nothing moved. No bird, no breeze. The battlefield had become a vacuum. At that moment, a ripple of sound cut through the air. The Panther's gun, clanking as it locked elevation. Keller recognized it instantly. The Germans were about to fire blind too. He had seconds. The loader braced, expecting orders to duck. Instead, Keller murmured a range number, 400. His finger rested on the trigger. He hesitated, not from fear but calculation. The math was wrong. Every chart said he couldn't make this shot. The hedgerow curve, the smoke density, the terrain elevation, it all said no. But something else in him said yes. He listened once more, one final breath of silence. Somewhere in that silence was the echo he needed. A faint metallic ring bounced back off a ruined farmhouse, offset by less than a second. It was enough. He pressed the trigger. The blast filled the tank with deafening thunder. The shell tore out into the white void and vanished. Keller felt the recoil, the backward shove of the cannon, the brief vacuum that followed. Then nothing. No impact, no explosion. Leonard started to speak, but stopped when the earth trembled. A low thud rolled through the valley. Then a bloom of orange flared behind the fog. The Panther had detonated. For several seconds, no one in the Sherman spoke. The radio crackled again. Voices from other units yelling. Confirmed hit. Panther burning. Unknown shooter. Keller sat motionless, his hands still on the controls. Leonard turned to him, mouth open, searching for words. Keller just said, "Write the angle down." Later, when reinforcements arrived, no one believed their story. The line of sight was impossible. The ridge blocked the view entirely. The engineers calculated the shell's arc. It should have buried itself harmlessly in the earth. Yet the Panther was gone, burned down to its steel skeleton. Command logged the event as unverified. That night, Keller cleaned the gun alone. The others celebrated quietly, too confused to question it. He opened his notebook and wrote in pencil, "Range, 400. Delay, 0.7. Target, confirmed by Echo." He closed it and placed it in his jacket. When asked how he knew, he said nothing. In the decades that followed, that entry disappeared into the bureaucracy of war. Folded, stamped, lost. But somewhere, in the static hum of that day, the sound still exists. A blind shot through smoke, across geometry and fear, through rules and disbelief. A moment where instinct defied every calculation and was right. And in the archives, that single burned file remains. The caption under its faded photo reads, "Enemy Panther destroyed. Line of sight impossible." It is not a story about luck. It is a story about a man who listened and heard the truth before anyone else could see it. Rain began before dawn, soft at first, then harder, turning the chalky soil of Hill 214 into slow rivers that ran beneath the tanks. The mist thickened until even nearby engines became rumor. Inside the Sherman, the world was reduced to sound and breath. The metallic hum of the idling engine, the slow rhythm of condensation dripping from the roof, the faint hiss of radio static that never quite went silent. Raymond Keller sat in his gunner's position, helmet off, listening. Every tone meant something to him. The click of cooling metal, the muffled churn of mud under treads somewhere distant, the occasional bark of artillery echoing from a direction that didn't match the maps. The war outside was a geometry of noise, and he lived inside its math. He hadn't slept. He never slept much during a push. The others tried to, half dozing between alarms, but Keller always said that the mind needed to stay tuned, like a compass needle that couldn't afford to drift. Private Leonard Moss, his loader, had once asked him if that was how he stayed calm. Keller's reply had been simple, "I'm not calm. I'm counting." That was the truth. Numbers were his rhythm, the only order he trusted in the chaos. He'd grown up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in a machine shop behind his father's small house. His earliest memories were of sound. The groan of the lathe, the squeal of belts, the distinct pitch of each motor when something was off balance. His father had a habit of muting the radio and asking, "What's wrong with it?" And Keller could always tell. To him, engines spoke in languages of vibration. The Army had never trained him for this. They trained him to look, to calculate through rangefinders and scopes. But when the smoke came, and it always came, sight was useless. Sound remained honest. By mid-morning, the rain stopped, leaving the hedgerows dripping and heavy. Their tank sat partially concealed by a bank of wet leaves. Turret aimed into a fog that looked carved from concrete. The commander had been evacuated before dawn. The replacement orders were supposed to come through the radio, but all that arrived was static and half-phrases. Leonard tried the set again, twisting dials until the speaker spat fragments of voices, a mix of American and German frequencies bleeding together. Blue 2, hold negative movement, Panthers confirmed north of. The line broke, then crackled back with a tone like wind whistling through metal. Leonard swore, smacked the radio, and glanced at Keller. "It's dead again." Keller didn't look up. "It's not dead," he said. "It's hearing too much." Leonard stared at him. "What's that even mean?" Keller finally turned. "It means we're not alone on this frequency." The younger man swallowed. He didn't like when Keller spoke that way, too calm, too certain. It made the air feel thinner, as if Keller knew something the rest didn't. Outside, the fog shifted. A new sound crawled through it. Deep, deliberate, uneven. The signature throb of a Maybach HL-230, a German Panther engine. Leonard froze. "You hear that?" Keller nodded. "He's idling, waiting for someone dumb enough to move first." He adjusted his periscope, but the glass showed only white. He turned to the range dial instead, setting it to 400 meters by instinct. Leonard's breath hitched. "Orders say we don't engage without visual." "Orders don't stop steel," Keller murmured. He tried the intercom again. The line popped, then cleared for a brief second. A voice came through, low and distorted, repeating, "Left of smoke. Target moving. Left of." The words trailed off into static. Leonard frowned. Was that the new commander? Keller's expression didn't change. That was Captain Hughes. Leonard blinked. "But Hughes," Keller nodded before he could finish. "Yeah, he's dead." The loader stared at the radio like it might come alive again. You think they recorded his voice? Some kind of loop?" Keller shook his head. "No, the signal's fresh. Propagation's wrong for a recording." Leonard shivered. "Then who's sending it?" Keller didn't answer. He adjusted his headset and went back to listening. Minutes passed. The fog pulsed with unseen motion, the whisper of treads repositioning, the faint scrape of turret teeth meshing. Keller imagined the battlefield like a map inside his skull. His tank near the southern hedge, the Panther just beyond the rise, maybe 10 degrees off-center. But there was something else. Another echo behind the Panther, faint, delayed by less than a second. It was reflecting off the slope, doubling back like an answer to a question he hadn't asked. He noted the rhythm. One main engine, one ghost. That ghost gave him distance. Leonard exhaled, shaky. "If we fire and it's wrong," Keller finished the thought quietly, "then we die." Silence returned. The rain picked up again, whispering on the hull. Keller could feel each drop through the vibration of steel. The loader's hands trembled as he held the next shell. "What are we even waiting for?" he muttered. Keller thought for a long moment before replying. "For the sound to tell the truth." He closed his eyes. The others thought it strange. A gunner who sighted with his ears. But Keller had long since stopped explaining himself. In that moment, everything outside the tank disappeared. He was back in his father's workshop, eyes shut, listening to the belt drive hum. Each whine told him where friction was hiding, where balance failed. The battlefield was no different, only louder. Another radio pulse broke the trance. The same voice again. "Left of smoke. Left of..." Then, faintly, something new. A hollow clank like a hatch closing. Keller snapped upright. "Turret rotation," he said. "They're turning right." Leonard swallowed hard. "You can't know that." Keller didn't argue. He simply adjusted his traverse wheel a fraction to match the change. The tank's gun moved with slow precision, cutting through air thick with moisture. The loader's voice dropped to a whisper. "Keller, we don't even know if—" He stopped as the Panther's cannon fired. The sound was like thunder tearing the sky. A round screamed overhead, missing by yards, exploding behind them. Dirt and shrapnel rattled off the hull. Keller didn't flinch. His left hand turned the elevation wheel. His right traced the trigger assembly lightly, almost tenderly. "We've got one shot," he said. Leonard stared at him. "You can't even see it." Keller nodded. "I don't need to." He tilted his head, listening again. The echo delay changed. 0.7 seconds now instead of 0.8. Closer. The Panther was advancing under cover, confident that its smoke made it invisible. That confidence would be its weakness. Keller adjusted the sight picture by instinct, the numbers forming silently behind his eyes. Then he hesitated. The silence pressed in again, heavier now, more human. This wasn't just calculation. This was disobedience. Orders said to hold. Commands said to wait. He was about to gamble not just his life, but his crew's on a feeling. The loader's breathing quickened. "Ray, if you're wrong," Keller replied softly. "If I'm wrong, you won't feel it." The tension inside the tank thickened until it was its own kind of weather. Every man there could hear Keller's heart, the steady rhythm against the clatter of distant engines. Outside, the fog shifted again. Faint outlines forming, dissolving. The air smelled of wet soil and cordite. Keller leaned into the gun sight one last time, though it showed nothing but gray. "Range 400, he whispered. Leonard stared. "We're blind." Keller gave a small nod. "So are they." He exhaled slowly, as if letting the decision pass through him like breath. Then he rested his finger on the trigger but did not pull it. Not yet. The echo had changed again. A new harmonic, almost imperceptible, caused by the rain striking the hull of the Panther somewhere ahead. The sound bounced differently now, hinting at open space behind it. That meant the tank had cleared the ridge. For the first time, it was exposed. He froze there, listening to a world no one else could hear, trying to decide whether this was instinct or madness. We're often made both feel the same. Leonard whispered a prayer under his breath. Keller's jaw tightened. Outside, lightning flashed behind the fog, distant artillery lighting the edges of the smoke in dull orange. It made the mist flicker like film running too slow. Keller thought of all the times he had been told to wait, to confirm, to obey. He thought of the dozens of friends who had followed orders into graves. He thought of how sometimes the only command worth hearing came from within the silence itself. His hand steadied on the trigger. The world around him seemed to pause. Rain hanging midair, sound folding inward. For a single heartbeat, there was no war, only the hum of two engines separated by belief. He had found the moment before decision, the breath between risk and reason. Everyone else would remember it as hesitation. He would remember it as clarity. He whispered to no one, "I have it." Then, quietly to himself, "They'll never believe this." The loader looked at him, wide-eyed. "Believe what?" Keller didn't answer. The fog thickened once more, sealing them in completely. Only the radio spoke now, faint, ghostly, repeating that same dead man's phrase. Left of smoke, left of... Then silence. And in that silence, Keller's decision took shape. Unseen, unrecorded, but inevitable. The morning broke without light. Smoke and mist had merged into one thick, formless sky that pressed down on the land until the hedgerows themselves seemed to shrink beneath its weight. The world was gray and hollow, soundless except for the slow mechanical breathing of engines. One American, one German. Neither seeing the other, both knowing the next sound could mean death. Inside the Sherman, Raymond Keller sat motionless. His eyes were open, but his mind was in another realm, somewhere between calculation and instinct. His loader, Leonard, watched him in silence, clutching the next shell like it was both weapon and prayer. The air was heavy with sweat and oil. Every heartbeat felt amplified by the steel walls surrounding them. Keller had always believed there was order in chaos. Even now, in the madness of battle, his mind searched for rhythm. The fog, the rain, the rumble of treads, all notes in a grim mechanical symphony. He could tell when a tank was moving uphill or downhill by the way the engine strained. He could feel vibration frequencies shifting as metal met mud, friction translating into music. But this was different. This was blindness, a duel fought in sound and faith. The Panther somewhere beyond that smoke was hunting them. His cannon fired once, the shell hissing overhead, exploding somewhere behind. The concussion rattled loose bolts and showered dirt across the hull. Leonard ducked instinctively. Keller didn't move. He simply turned one small dial. 2 degrees, maybe 3. The adjustment was minute, invisible, but to him it felt exact. He breathed slowly, lips barely moving. "She's blind too," he whispered. Leonard blinked. "You think she missed on purpose?" Keller shook his head. "No, she's guessing, just like us." He paused. "But she's louder." Outside, the fog shifted. A windless, eerie movement, as if the air itself was being dragged by something immense. Keller pressed his ear to the steel frame. He could feel the vibration of the Panther's engine. Steady, disciplined, German precision. He tried to picture its position. Likely hull down behind a shallow rise, gun peeking just over the edge. That meant only the top of its turret was exposed. The shot would have to be perfect, a geometry of fractions. But there was no sight picture, no rangefinder, no line. Only the invisible map inside his head. The radio clicked, then hummed again. Faint, distorted voices overlapping like ghosts. Unknown unit firing, negative ID, repeat. Then static swallowed the rest. For a second, Keller thought he heard his commander's voice again. The one that shouldn't exist. He froze, listening harder. The frequency hissed, then whispered, "You're too far right." Leonard frowned. What did it say? Keller didn't answer. The Panther's engine revved, louder now. It was moving forward. A low groan of treads grinding through wet earth echoed through the valley. Keller felt the vibration under his boots and instantly understood its direction. "She's advancing," he said. Leonard's face went pale. "Shouldn't we pull back?" Keller's eyes narrowed through the fogged glass. "If we move, she hears us. If we fire, she sees us. So we wait." Seconds became minutes. Each heartbeat was a countdown with no numbers. The loader's hands shook. "You really think you can hit something you can't even see?" Keller didn't look at him. "You can hear your own heartbeat, can't you?" Leonard hesitated. "Yeah. Then it's there. Doesn't matter if you see it or not." The Panther fired again. This time, the sound of the shot came with a subtle echo, an acoustic fingerprint. The shell missed, exploding to their left, but Keller's ears caught something more valuable. He counted the milliseconds between the firing sound and the explosion's reflection. He did the math silently. That echo came from a hedgerow behind them. The angle was off, which meant the Panther had turned slightly, maybe 20 degrees east. She was exposing her side armor now. He adjusted the traverse wheel one more time. The barrel shifted a few inches, invisible movement in the fog. He spoke softly, "Loader, 1 armor piercing." Leonard slid the shell into place, his breath unsteady. Loaded. The click of the breech closing sounded final, almost ceremonial. Keller rested his hand on the trigger. He was calm now, as if every part of him had accepted that this moment was already written. The world around him disappeared. There was no tank, no loader, no war, only distance, numbers, and sound. He closed his eyes and listened one last time. The rain had slowed. Beneath it, the rhythmic hum of the Panther continued, steady as a heartbeat. Then, faintly, another sound layered beneath it. A metallic ping, a tiny harmonic note that rang differently. To anyone else, it was meaningless. To Keller, it meant the Panther had opened its driver's hatch. That was his cue. He whispered, "Range 400. Wind 0. Fire 1." His finger squeezed the trigger. The cannon's roar split the air. The recoil slammed through his chest, the whole tank jerking backward. The blast wave shoved the fog outward like an invisible hand. For a second, the world became white light. The shell vanished into it. Then silence. No explosion. No hit. Just the echo rolling through the valley like distant thunder. Leonard's breath caught. "Did we miss?" Keller didn't reply. His ears strained. He could feel the air vibrating, like sound traveling through water. Then it came. A low rumble, a metallic scream, followed by a blast so deep it felt like the ground itself tore open. The Panther exploded. The shockwave hit their tank seconds later, dust falling from the ceiling, dials rattling in their sockets. Leonard shouted, "You hit it! You actually hit it!" Keller stayed still, eyes closed, listening to the burning echo fade. "She stopped singing," he said quietly. Through the periscope, the fog began to thin. A glow emerged ahead, orange flames licking upward, distorted by mist. The smell of burning fuel and steel drifted into the Sherman's vents. Leonard stared in disbelief. "But the ridge, there's no way we had an angle." Keller didn't answer. He reached for his notebook, flipping to a fresh page, and wrote, "Range 400. Echo delay 0.7. Target confirmed by sound." The radio crackled again, this time with clarity. "Panther destroyed. Unknown firing source. All units advance." Another voice overlapped. "Artillery must have gotten it." Keller gave a faint, humorless smile. "Let them believe that." They rolled forward cautiously. The field opened up, revealing the Panther's carcass still smoldering. It lay twisted at the base of the ridge, turret blown clean off. A direct hit to the ammunition rack. Leonard stared. "That shot came from us. But the trajectory, it's impossible." Keller said nothing. He climbed out, helmet off, breathing the acrid air. Rain hissed against the burning steel, turning the wreck into a boiling cauldron of steam. He studied it for a long time, then turned away. Later that afternoon, when the engineers arrived to inspect the damage, the confusion only deepened. Their instruments showed no clear line of fire from the Sherman's recorded position. The trajectory, when plotted, went straight through the hill itself. "It doesn't make sense," one officer muttered. "It's like the shell curved." Keller watched silently as they measured, argued, and scribbled notes. He didn't correct them. He didn't explain anything. That night, in the field report, the event was labeled unverified engagement, probable misfire or external support. No commendation, no recognition. Just another anomaly buried under paperwork. Keller didn't mind. The crew survived, and that was enough. He cleaned the gun, logged the range, and tucked the notebook back into his jacket. Leonard, still restless, finally asked, "How did you know where it was?" Keller gave a faint shrug. "I didn't." He paused. "I just listened." When darkness returned, the field grew quiet again. The fire from the Panther still burned faintly, a single glowing wound in the night. The men of the 2nd Armored moved onward, leaving Hill 214 behind, but something lingered there. The echo of a shot no one saw, the invisible geometry of sound and instinct. In later debriefings, Keller's name was barely mentioned. The officers wanted predictable explanations, not mysteries. Yet among the tank crews, stories began to spread. Of a gunner who could hear through fog, who fired blind and never missed. Some said he had radar before radar existed. Others claimed divine guidance. Keller said nothing to anyone. He carried his notebook, filled with numbers that no one else could understand, and kept listening. As they advanced east through Normandy, the fields behind them swallowed the remains of Hill 214. The Panther was left to rust where it fell. Rain and soil claimed its bones, its blackened turret sinking into the earth. By the time the war ended, even the coordinates had been lost. Only Keller remembered exactly where it had stood, not by sight, but by sound. He never explained how. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe some truths in war were meant to remain silent. It was nearly 40 years later when anyone spoke the name Hill 214 again. The war had ended. The men scattered to their quiet American lives, and the field in Normandy had long since healed. The hedgerows had regrown, the mud had turned to farmland, and the metal bones of tanks beneath the soil were left to rust in peace. By the early 1980s, the war had become a subject of documentaries and faded photographs. Veterans were growing old, their stories blending into nostalgia and myth. Most of them spoke of Normandy like a distant storm, something once violent, now faintly unbelievable. But inside a forgotten storage room at Fort Knox, a civilian acoustics researcher named Dr. Paul Henders opened a crate that would bring one man's silence back into the light. The crate was marked with 2 words, field recordings. Inside were dozens of magnetic wire spools, fragile, oxidized, and mislabeled. The tags listed unit names and locations: 2nd Armored Division, Bastogne Trials, Ardennes sound tests. Among them, one small reel caught his attention. Its label, nearly unreadable, said, A2 Hill 214. There was no corresponding record in the archives. Curious, Henders threaded the brittle wire through an old player and let it run. The sound that came out was more noise than speech. A low, humming chaos of static, wind, and faint machinery. But then, under it, a pattern emerged. Rhythmic pulses, pauses, and a single voice giving a quiet order. Range 400 fire. He replayed it 3 times, each time isolating frequencies, adjusting equalization. When the blast finally came through the speakers, the room seemed to shake. Then, seconds later, the echo delayed, soft, perfectly timed. He ran the timing difference through his computer. 0.7 seconds. The echo delay matched the distance of a reflected sound across roughly 400 yards of terrain. He leaned back in disbelief. Whoever fired that shot had not guessed. He had measured. Henders sent the data to the Army Acoustic Research Laboratory for analysis. They confirmed the physics. If a man could subconsciously process echo delays and frequency shifts in real time, he could triangulate sound sources almost like sonar, something no training manual in 1944 could have imagined. The report was stamped, unlikely but plausible. The man's name on the original form, faded but legible, was Staff Sergeant Raymond Keller. In 1983, a journalist for Military Archives Review interviewed Henders about the discovery. "You're saying this soldier used his ears like radar?" he asked. Henders smiled faintly. "Not radar. Pattern recognition. His mind made a map of sound. He didn't invent anything new. He just listened better than most of us ever will." The journalist laughed, assuming exaggeration. Henders didn't. He kept studying the recording, comparing it with battlefield geography from that region of Normandy. Satellite scans revealed that the terrain around the old Hill 214 still had a distinct acoustic shape, a shallow bowl with hedgerows on both sides. It would have perfectly amplified echoes, allowing Keller to sense distance not by sight, but by timing. Meanwhile, veterans from Keller's old unit were contacted. Some remembered him vaguely: quiet guy, good gunner. One of those who kept to himself. None knew what became of him. Records showed he returned home in 1945, married once, worked as a machinist, and died in 1967 of a heart attack while repairing a lathe. No medals, no commendations. His family never knew about Hill 214. When Henders found his widow, she told him Keller never spoke of the war. He kept one small notebook locked in a drawer, covered in pencil scribbles, numbers, decimals, fragments of equations. After his death, she'd thrown it away, assuming it was work notes. The Army's interest in the file was short-lived. By the 1980s, technology had advanced beyond human instinct. Computers could already calculate trajectory, radar could map movement, and thermal imaging saw through smoke. Keller's story was a curiosity, not a revelation. The file was reclassified under historical anomalies. But the more Henders studied it, the more it haunted him. The physics made sense. The man had simply been ahead of his time. The psychology, though, was what fascinated him. How did a young gunner under fire access such precision? Was it luck, instinct, or something deeper, a subconscious ability tuned by stress and necessity? In 1984, Henders published a small paper titled Human Acoustic Triangulation in Combat Conditions. It cited Keller anonymously, referring to him only as Subject A2. The conclusion was understated. Under extreme sensory deprivation, human cognition may process auditory data faster than conscious awareness allows. Instinct is often unacknowledged calculation. The paper was largely ignored by the scientific community. But among veterans who read it, whispers began again. Letters arrived from men who had fought in the same division, gunners who remembered hearing about a blind shot that destroyed a Panther through smoke. Some called it luck. Others swore it was a miracle. One letter came from Leonard Moss, Keller's loader. He was 82, living quietly in Missouri. His handwriting was shaky, but his memory was sharp. He wrote, "I was there. He didn't guess. He knew. When the shot hit, I thought we were dead. But Ray didn't even flinch. He said it like a fact 400, then pulled the trigger. He always said you could hear the truth if you were quiet enough." Henders kept that letter in his desk until his own death years later. Back in France, the land itself kept its secrets. In 1985, a group of local farmers clearing stones unearthed the rusted hull of a Panther tank beneath a layer of mud and wild grass. French authorities identified it as German, likely abandoned during retreat. Its left side showed a single entry hole, precise, clean, through the turret ring. The trajectory lined perfectly with the direction of Hill 214. News of the find reached Henders. He compared coordinates and distances. The math matched Keller's own recorded range. The odds of coincidence were astronomical. For a moment, history shifted. A mystery once dismissed as impossible had physical proof. A hole through armor exactly where no one believed a shell could pass. And yet, the story faded again. There were no medals to issue, no one to honor. Keller was long dead, his name buried in paperwork. The Panther hull was hauled off to a museum in Cannes, displayed without plaque or explanation. Visitors saw it and moved on, unaware that the hole in its side was the punctuation mark of a man's impossible instinct. Sometimes, after decades, truth returns like an echo. It comes quieter, distorted, yet unmistakable. For Henders, that echo became an obsession. He played the recording hundreds of times. He slowed it, inverted it, filtered the frequencies until he realized there was another layer of sound just before the shot. Faint, nearly inaudible. A heartbeat. 2 beats. Steady. Then the command, range 400. It wasn't fear or panic. It was control. Keller's pulse had synchronized with the rhythm of the machine he aimed. To most, that detail would mean nothing. But to Henders, it was the final proof that instinct and science were never opposites. They were the same process, divided only by understanding. Keller's mind had performed what technology would later call real-time echo mapping. He didn't defy physics, he embodied it. The final page of the declassified report ends not with a conclusion, but with a quote from the researcher himself. "He was not a man of miracles. He was a man of math who learned to pray with his ears." Today, the fields around St. Lo are quiet again. Children play where tanks once burned. Tourists walk the old roads, unaware that beneath their feet lies a story never properly told. The story of a gunner who fired blind into smoke and struck truth itself. The locals say that sometimes, on calm nights, when fog rolls in from the river and settles low among the hedgerows, the sound of a single cannon echoes faintly, then fades into silence. Perhaps it's imagination, perhaps it's memory, or perhaps it's the last trace of something the world still doesn't understand. The sound of instinct calculating what reason could not. Raymond Keller's name never entered textbooks. His diary vanished. His medal was never struck. But in one forgotten recording, in a line of numbers no one could interpret, and in a tank long since swallowed by the earth, he left a language only the patient can hear. The narrator's voice would fade over that final image. A field of fog, a whisper of static, and a single quote rising softly through the quiet. Sometimes instinct is just science we haven't written down yet.